Hey, how's it going, y'all? Jinsula here with a brand new Pokemon Go video. I hope your day is going fantastically well, and let's dive right into it. Alright, so we're approaching the end of the year, and it's a good time to reflect on everything that Niantic added into Pokemon Go during this year. And I have to say that when it comes to 2024, it was a phenomenal year of Pokemon releases. Believe it or not, there was a lot of legendaries and a lot of mythical Pokemon that are really powerful. And I will say that for the most part, even though they did not release a lot of new Pokemon, they went with quality over quantity. And I wanted to talk about some of the Pokemon that they released, because as we look back on 2024, there's going to be a lot of Pokemon that are going to be useful for years to come, and I did want to highlight them so that you know which Pokemon you should invest into. So yeah, with that said, let's dive right into it, starting off with Mega Heracross. Let's start off with this Pokemon because when Mega Heracross was first released, it was basically the #1 bug type as well as the #1 fighting type, and of course, it's only going to get outclassed by other Mega Evolutions that were released later on down the line. So I will say that the gameplay impact of this Pokemon was pretty drastic, and I do think that no matter what, it's still going to be a really good Pokemon to use. It does deal a lot of DPS, and of course, the combination of bug and fighting is quite unique. So this is definitely a Pokemon you should consider using, and I do think it's a major standout among all of the Pokemon that was released in 2024. Alright, next let's talk about another Pokemon that made its debut in this year, and it was a Pokemon that definitely made an impact within PvP. And I'm of course talking about Annihilape. Now, when Annihilape came out, it was basically a meta Pokemon within the Open Great League, and it did get nerfed for a little bit of time because there was a move shakeup, and it was something that a lot of players did not end up using. But with the most recent season, Annihilape has once again become quite relevant, and I will say that this is one of those Pokemon that does have the wall rain effect, in that when it was released, it was definitely a Pokemon that players wanted to use. So I will say that within the PvP world, this is definitely one of those Pokemon that was definitely impactful this year. Now, the next Pokemon on this list is going to be Blacephalon. This is a Pokemon that is going to get outclassed in some situations, but as a Ghost type and a Fire type raid attacker, this Pokemon is actually quite good. It may not necessarily be top tier, but I do think that this Pokemon is definitely worth investing into. In a lot of different lists for the top fire type raid attackers, you will often see Blacephalon on that list, and the reason for that is because this is a very powerful glass cannon. It's essentially a beefed up version of Chandelure, and I think the only Pokemon that's going to outclass it is going to be Shadow Chandelure. So I do think this Pokemon is quite good. It's definitely not going to hurt your account if you spend the Stardust and candies to power it up. Now, the next Pokemon that I want to talk about is going to be a pseudo-legendary that made its debut this year, and it is going to be none other than Dragapult. This Pokemon does have a very powerful moveset, and regardless if you need it as a Ghost type or a Dragon type, Dragapult is definitely a Pokemon you should not sleep on. Much like Blacephalon, this is a Pokemon you will see in the top counters for Ghost types and Dragon types, and it's definitely one that is worth your resources. Eventually, it is going to get a community day, much like every other pseudo-legendary, but it's going to be a while before we see it. But until then, this is definitely going to be a decent Pokemon for you to use, and I do suggest that you power it up, especially if you have yourself a 100% IV. Alright, now earlier when I talked about Mega Heracross, I talked about a Mega Evolution that immediately outclassed it as a Mega Evolution fighting type, and that is of course going to be the next entry on this list, and that is Mega Lucario. When it comes to fighting types, this Pokemon is the absolute king. You cannot deny how powerful this Pokemon is. I will say that when it comes to fighting types, Mega Lucario is going to be essential, and it's definitely going to be a powerful Pokemon for years to come. I really do think that when it comes to Mega Evolutions, this is one of those you absolutely need to dedicate all of your resources into because it's going to be useful all around. I do think that Mega Lucario made an insane impact when it was first released, and I do think that for a lot of players, they're going to have this Pokemon in their arsenal whenever a raid boss has a a fighting type as one of the counters. Now let's move on to legendary Pokemon that were released this year, and we gotta talk about the 2 origin form legendaries that were released with the Go Tour event in the beginning of this year. And I'm of course talking about Origin Form Dialga and Origin Form Palkia. Let's first talk about Origin Form Dialga. This is a very powerful Pokemon in and of itself. When it comes to Dragon type raid attackers, you're definitely going to want to use one with Roar of Time. Unfortunately, Roar of Time is one of those moves that is exclusive and hard to get, and you can't even use an elite charge TM in order to get it. But if you do happen to have yourself a high IV Origin Form Dialga with Roar of Time, it is definitely worth your investment. It's a very powerful Pokemon when it comes to raid battles, but Roar of Time in and of itself is extremely useful. It will extend the duration of premium items like the Daily Adventure Incense, and that's definitely something that makes it quite unique and very useful. Now, the other Origin Form legendary that we got earlier this year is going to be Palkia, and very similarly to Origin Form Dialga, it's going to be a very powerful raid attacker, but I think it shines the most when it comes to PvP, specifically in the Master League. Now, the Adventure Effect move that Origin Form Palkia has is called Spatial Rend, and much like Roar of Time with Origin Form Dialga, it's a very powerful attack, but it also has a lot of usefulness. This move actually increases the radius at which you see Pokemon, so when it comes to different events like the Wild Area event or Go Fest or Go Tour, as well as the Community Day events that we have, this is a very useful adventure effect that you will definitely want to utilize. And then finally, let's talk about the 2 fusion forms of Necrozma. These made their debut during Pokemon Go Fest of this year, and both of them are extremely meta, and they're going to be for a very long time. Let's first talk about Duskmane Necrozma. As of right now, it is currently the #1 Steel type raid attacker in the game, even beating out some Mega Evolutions. I will say the only Pokemon that's going to outclass it in the future is going to be Mega Metagross, and I do think that says a lot about this one particular Pokemon. The nice thing about Duskmane Necrozma is that you could have multiple copies of it, so that means when it comes to raid bosses that are weak against Steel type attacks, having yourself a bunch of Duskmane Necrozmas is going to make that raid boss very easy to take down. Now, on the other side of the token, we have Dawnwings Necrozma, which is the other fusion form of this Pokemon. And much like Duskmane Necrozma, this is a meta Pokemon that you do not want to ignore. Duskmane Necrozma may be the absolute best Steel type, but Dawnwings Necrozma is going to be the absolute best Ghost type. It's only outclassed by Mega Evolutions, and I will say that having a bunch of them is definitely going to elevate your account. If you're lucky enough to have multiples of these with high IVs, you should definitely invest into them because they're going to be extremely powerful. And the other thing is, when it comes to Dawnwings Necrozma, it's also considered meta when it comes to the Master League. So if you happen to have a 100% IV of this Pokemon and you power it up, you're going to have a very powerful Pokemon for both raid battles as well as the Master League, which is actually quite rare. So yeah, all of these are the absolute best of the best Pokemon that were released in 2024, and like I said, they went with quality over quantity. We did not get that many Pokédex entries in the year 2024, but at the very least, with all the Pokemon that they released, a good number of them were actually quite useful, and it makes me very hopeful for the year 2025. I really hope they do not swing the pendulum the other way and just release a whole bunch of Pokemon without providing any quality. But I do think that we're going to get ourselves some really powerful Pokemon in the coming year because they've been teasing certain Pokemon for a very long time, which I know are going to be meta. I'm of course talking about Pokemon like Mega Metagross, as well as both forms of Mega Mewtwo. And then of course we got both Black Kyurem and White Kyurem, the 2 fusion forms of this Pokemon, which are likely going to make a debut during Go Tour of 2025. So yeah, there is a very high chance that 2025 might outshine 2024 in terms of Pokemon releases, but we'll just have to wait and see. At the very least, 2024 was a very strong year for Pokemon releases, and I am very stoked for all the Pokemon that did come out. And yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts regarding all the Pokemon that I talked about down below. Is there a particular Pokemon that was released in 2024 that I completely missed? Do you feel like all these Pokemon are really powerful, or are they overrated? Definitely share your reasons for thinking that down below in the comments, and let's have a great discussion. Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. I really hope you found it to be entertaining. And yeah, my name is Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you in the next one.